Hello everyone and welcome back to our month-long emergency series. We are nearing the end. The end is near. So today is day 28. Who has been here the whole time? So today we're talking about a bird strike. So here's a common scenario. Let's say you just lift off and you see a flock of birds starting to cross over the end of the runway, right? Or you are on final and you see some birds starting to cross the approach end of the runway. So what do you do in these situations? So after you have just lifted off, you're low, you're slow, you don't really even have a lot of excess energy or even room to do any wild maneuvers. So some small turns or pitch changes might be appropriate, but don't do anything too crazy in this situation. Now, if you are on final and you see some birds coming over the approach end of the runway, you have a few more options. So should you continue to land or should you go around, right? That would be one of them. So this option is up to you. Likely you want to do what provides you the best choice of missing our feathered friends. So if they are starting to move out, and then landing should be fine. But if they are just kind of milling around, no certain direction, or their path is really uncertain, it never hurts to go around. So let's say you try your best to avoid the birds, but despite your best efforts, you end up hitting one. So if you strike a bird, remember the most important rule of flying, which is to fly the aircraft, right? There are cases of pilots attempting to dodge initial or subsequent birds, which have then actually lost control of the aircraft or hit the ground when they were close to taking off or landing. So when trying to avoid birds, you must maintain control of the aircraft. Now, if you are on short final and there are birds, obviously you don't want to try to dive under them. So if you pitch up, don't pitch up so high that you'll induce a stall, right? And then if you do hit one, maintain control of the aircraft. Second, then you want to evaluate the impact to the aircraft, right? This will determine your next steps. Now, some cases will be obvious. So if you have a bird sitting in your lap, if you have like a shattered, bloody windshield, you're going to have a challenge to bring the aircraft back around and in for a landing. Forward visibility is going to be limited due to a broken windshield. You might even be injured. It'll be, very loud in the cockpit, maybe impossible to hear the radio. So there are a few cases, on Bass Aviation of this happening where the pilots really had to work to land the plane. But what if the bird hits the wing or the tail? Well, most likely you probably have some structural damage, right? Even smaller birds can create a hole in the wing or deform the part of the aircraft. The structural integrity of the aircraft could be compromised, right? So if you hit a bird en route, I think you want to head towards the nearest airport and get safely on the ground and then evaluate the damage. While bird strikes for the most part are unpredictable, there are a few precautions we can take, to lower the odds of this occurrence. So 90% of bird strikes take place at airports during takeoff or landing. So one step you can do to avoid a bird strike is to avoid areas of known risk, right? Sometimes you hear at towered or even non-towered airports, someone on the radio say, hey, aircraft on final, just FYI, there's some large birds milling around there off the end of the runway. Then the pilot can be alert for them, right? You have this advanced knowledge to be alert that there's birds in that area. Or even you can just perform like a low approach and potentially, that'll scare them and they'll fly off. Also, for airports with heavy bird activity, you can find notes in the chart supplement for different warnings on bird hazards, and be sure to read that info before flying into that airport. So another thing you can do to avoid bird strikes is avoid flying, low over marshlands, landfills, beaches, known areas where birds will be congregating. And then if you do see birds, it's generally advisable to fly over them, assuming you have a choice, rather than flying under them, since it seems like many birds have a tendency to dive when they sense danger. But they all don't, right? Some climb, some just fly erratically, so you really need to be alert in the vicinity of birds. So then following these things can help avoid a bird strike. Of course, as we all know, birds can just seemingly appear out of nowhere, leaving you little time to take evasive actions, right? Probably many of us have been flying, even in cruise, and then all of a sudden it's like two birds zoom right across the windshield. It's like, where did they come from? So day 28, bird strike. Have you ever hit one? So I've had plenty of close calls, as probably most of us have, but fortunately I've never hit one. So thanks everyone for watching today. Hope you catch it on day 29. Fly safe.